and welcome to the inaugural Reuters event, Delivering Net Zero Virtual Week. Today and tomorrow, we'll be bringing you a number of business critical discussions on the need and opportunity for business to lead to a net zero future. I hope you're sitting comfortably and have your coffee or tea to hand, as we have a number of really interesting sessions to get us underway. To kick off today's discussions, as you can see with me now, we have Marc Engel, Chief Supply Chain Officer at Unilever, Xavier Houot, Senior Vice President, Group Environment, Safety, Real Estate at Schneider Electric, and Hannah Pathak, UK and Europe Director at Forum for the Future, talking to how companies can lead the way to the race to zero and a net zero future. This session is live, and if you haven't been involved in any of our events previously, we want you to get involved. We want to field your questions and answer as many questions as we can. So just beneath the stream right now, you can see a Q&A box, so do get your questions in, and Hannah will try to get through as many of those questions later in the discussion. But for now, I know they've got a great discussion lined up. It's 45 minutes, so I won't keep any more of their time. Hannah, I'd like to get the day's proceedings underway. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Liam. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world joining us today. It's with great pleasure that we're kicking off the next couple of days, talking about net zero and how companies and businesses and the wider system as a whole can really shift society and shift economies. And it's a really exciting discussion. We know we're at a time of immense change at the moment, but immense change does mean also immense opportunity. So I'm really delighted to be joined by Xavier and Marc, and to be bringing together discussions from really quite different sectors of business. So one in the FMCG space, one in the energy and tech space. And I think between you both, and I'm coming from an NGO perspective from Forum for the Future, I think we're going to have a really lively conversation. So really looking forward to exploring some of the issues, challenges, successes, key features about net zero strategies with you both. One thing that Marc said just in the few moments before we joined you all was that although Schneider and Unilever have very different types of business, they share a hell of a lot in terms of values and beliefs in common. So I think that's a great place to start. So Marc, I'm going to invite you to start and just kind of give us an overview really of that journey that you've been on within Unilever and where you're at the moment.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hannah. It's a pleasure to be here with you and with Xavier. Schneider Electric and Unilever, brothers from a different mother, I would say. Very similar beliefs and journeys that we've been on, and we've shared a lot of those. So it's great to be here. Thank you. I think where I would start is that obviously at a time where the world is dealing with devastating effects of a COVID pandemic. It's grappling with very serious issues of inequality at the moment. And no doubt there will be some sort of economic crisis. You know, the debate is how deep it's going to be, but there's no doubt that that will happen. So it's very easy to forget that the stuff that was there before, notably the climate crisis, is still a huge threat to us. Nothing has changed. In fact, if there is one silver lining from the whole COVID pandemic, is that it actually has shown us at the depth of the crisis, when there were no planes flying and no cars driving, you can curb emissions. And so, you know, it's a very clear proof point that when you do the right thing and when you get mass action to curb emissions, you can actually make a change. So because many people have been skeptical about that, but the COVID crisis has proven, because there has been a dip in carbon dioxide levels at the peak of April, May in the crisis. So, you know, it's very clear to everybody now. Everybody intellectually understands that net zero by 2050 is the minimum that has to be done. And the good news is that it is easy to understand. It's very binary. It's black and white. 1.5 degrees equals net zero by 2050. But what's also very clear is that the window of opportunity is closing here. And this must be absolutely the decade of delivery. Even though that decade of delivery has started very badly for all of us, we have to stay committed to deliver that. And whilst it's intellectually easy to understand, you know, we are a consumer company serving 3 billion consumers around the world. So how can we help 8 billion citizens of the world to become, to lead carbon neutral lives or net zero carbon lives? Because at the end of the day, That's why we're all in business for. We are serving a part or a whole of society. And let there be no mistake, net zero by 2050 means that you and me and everybody else around the world also need to set up our lives to be ready for a net zero commitment in our personal lives. And for companies, our biggest job is to help those citizens around the world achieve that, because only then you will keep within the 1.5 degrees of the Paris Agreement. Now, I think there are two big things. One is zero, and the other one is net. So in the commitment, there are two big words. And I think it's probably, before I go to Unilever, it's important to underline that, is that, whilst in the past we've been talking about halving and reducing, et cetera, it's the first time in history that we need to think about zero and not doing a little bit less harm, but doing good by zero and possibly even go beyond. The other big thing is net. And net is a very charged word, because you can basically not do anything about your emissions and just buy in every carbon offset that you can find. And the question is whether, if everybody does that, there will not be enough offsets to buy for everybody to go to zero and for the world to go to zero. So the plan needs to be a holistic plan about renewable energy, reducing emissions, and not, oh, well, let's do this quick and fast and buy some offsets. So at Unilever, that's basically been our journey. We've been at this journey since 2010. We started at our own operations. We then made a commitment in 2010 to halve the impact across the chain from cradle to grave or cradle to cradle. We failed miserably at the downstream part of that. That means in your home, when you cook your cup of tea or you wash your hair in the shower, because we found it is very difficult to change consumer behavior. But it's also, you don't control government timings on when they go to green electricity and when they make conversions away from natural gas, et cetera, et cetera. But it's what we realized is, we have got an internal carbon price since 2016. We started at $30, we put $5 on it every year, and we think we will continue to do that until $80 or $100. We redirect the money from that internal fund to what we call a climate tech fund, which is to clean up our own footprint. But we were realizing that we, in a fast-moving consumer goods company, your own footprint, scope 1 and 2, is less than 5% of the total, because 2/3 of the carbon footprint of our products are in your home, and roughly 1/3 is upstream with our suppliers, and then a very, very tiny part is in our operations. So the commitment that we've made a month ago, we very deliberately did that at this time to make a net zero commitment by 2039, to start towards working transparency, to put carbon labeling on our products, to help 8 billion citizens to lead carbon neutral lives, to launch a climate and nature fund, a 1 billion fund, to start to address some of the issues and to start to put serious funding behind that, and to look at water consumption. Has been very deliberately, because we said we need to play the bigger game. We need to show that business has a role to play, because the green recovery out of COVID-19 is for sure, has got to be a collaborative action and not a competitive action. It's the only way how we start to turn this. So let me leave it there and pass it back to you, Hannah. Thank you.
That's great, thank you. And I think I'll keep that as the soundbite, as the green recovery is critical as we head out of COVID. And this is a point of opportunity in order to be able to do that. Xavier, if I could invite you to give us a story of the journey that Schneider has been on.
Sure, thank you, Hannah. And likewise, I'm very delighted to be with you and share the stage with Marc, with whom we share quite a lot of aspirations as corporation as individuals. So I won't repeat what Marc spelled out nicely. I will maybe add to what he said and make it specific to Schneider Electric. So as a company, as you mentioned, Anna, we are very much into the B2B space. Mostly we are making buildings, homes, data centers and grids efficient, safe, reliable, and decarbonized. That's our business. So we are into the energy management and industry automation space. So when I look at the environment, strategy of Schneider, we really have a three-pronged strategy. Climate is one of them, alongside resources and biodiversity. And the way we want to see ourselves progress and is on these three layers, you know, decarbonization, resource efficiency, circular economy, and life preservation, biodiversity. On these three dimensions, we want to make our own operations decorrelate, decoupled at a pace which is that of science, SBTI for climate, but SBT for biodiversity or whatever is going to come next. We want to look at our own footprint and shrink it and decorrelate it from nature as fast as it should. But as Marc said rightly, our own footprint is just one piece of it. So the second leg of our strategy is to make our customers likewise achieve the same. So we are very peculiar about our force in R&D, in innovation, to come up with technologies which by design are helping our customers do the very same. How do we help them decarbonize their data centers? How we make those infrastructure circular by design with products which last 15, 20, 25 years, taken back, retrofitted. And as far as biodiversity and life preservation is concerned, how do we minimize substances, chemical substances of harm, taking back at the end of the life, making everything secondary and move away from any packaging, you know, labeling products which may come from a virgin or non-circular materials. So, and through our customers, we want to quantify how we make the world itself enjoy what we call a one planet prosperity. So very much we want to look at ourselves and our own success, first through the lens of our customers, and even through the fact that we together move the date of Earth overshoot, for instance, or we help together move climate trajectory below 1.5 degrees. So if I look at Earth overshoot date, what we did, we signed up a partnership with the Global Footprint Network and Matthijs Wakker and I 3-4 years ago, which helped us understand how much through the adoption of solutions like ours, the world could possibly be living under the limit of one planet by design. And by the way, we invite people from other sectors, you know, of course, food and textile and transportation, to likewise do the same, and together visualize how we can help emerge a world which is zero carbon by design and circular to make the Earth Overshoot Day. This year, as you know, it's 22nd August. Last year was 29th July, so it's later, but because or thanks to COVID, or because of COVID, I should say, because of the drama it causes, 3.5 weeks later than last year. But let's have that journey by intention, and that's what drives us. So if I look at Schneider on our own footprint, that I say the smaller, as Marc was, is a single-digit percentage of the end-to-end carbon footprint of the overall supply chain of Schneider. We have signed up to EP100, RE100, EV100, which are those three climate group CDP initiatives about energy efficiency, renewable electricity, and electrical vehicle. And on this, we have targets to be in 5 years carbon neutral with some offsets, and net zero in 10 years. So what it means, it may sound the easiest bit, but what it entails to be net zero is, as Marc was alluding to, is fairly, you know, it's a set of transformations. Even if we move all our 15,000 vehicles to electrical cars, that's just one step of the journey. We need to fuel all of those cars globally with renewable electricity. And that's, as many people would appreciate on the call, it's not something easier to be implemented everywhere in the globe. Moving all energy down to zero emission means the electricity has to be renewable. It may be the easiest bit, but what about the non-electrical energies? Fuel, gas, you name it. So how do we move those non-electrical energies to something which is zero carbon initially without offset? So we are into that journey for us. On the second layer, it's all about R&D, making our product always less emissive, from less, you know, energy consuming, less heat dispersion, and enabling our customers save so much more on their end. So on this, we have quantified for each year how many tons of CO2 our products are saving on our customers' end. Real savings when we do modernize a building, when we do modernize a data center, make it better than it was. These are genuine savings of CO2 which were not emitted to the atmosphere, which were before. And this we are every quarter, through the voice of our CEO, Jean-Pascal Tricoire, reporting the progress of how many millions of CO2 that we help our customers save. It's been 120 million tons of CO2 over 3 years. And today we are slightly ahead of the target for the end of 2020. So we want to always improve that ability of our company, like Marc was alluding for Unilever, committed to help its customers to live a lower carbon life, a lower carbon use of their products. Likewise, we do it and we quantify that to be able to say, I hope sooner than later, that more Schneider technologies in buildings and homes and this is a better climate. Not through real lenient or approximate methodology, something very conservative, very technically proven, vetted by third parties, best experts, which tell us, hey guys, your numbers are really robust and very, very minimalized. So before I pause and give it back to you, Anna, the key thing which we see needed is partnerships, is collaborations, whether I talk upstream or downstream. That may be a part of the discussion we're going to have in a few next minutes, is about working with those suppliers, those partners, engaging customers so that not only us in our, say, smaller footprint, all in all, percentage-wise, we shrink ourselves, which is good to start, but that's not enough, far from it. So we need to really engage and find the ways to engage in new ways of buying, new ways of consuming, which for us is the next journey. So that's it for me. A few words about Schneider's approach towards carbon neutrality. To you, Anna.
Great, thank you so much, Xavier. And I think already there's some clear synergies, even though you're from very different sectors. So that call for collaboration being absolutely key for delivery, and also, and probably very much related to that call for collaboration, is the importance of influencing outside of your own company and really taking that systemic view. And whether that's with consumers or suppliers or governments, these are all critical agents of change in this whole race to net zero. So some good key themes coming out already. Looking forward to seeing what else comes out. So my first question, and we have a few sort of lined up, and then we'll go into the audience questions. But my first one is really around enabling conditions. And so I'm sure on the call, we have lots of people who are in similar sort of situations, but they might be in companies that are starting their net zero journey. And I think both of you here are representing organizations that have a degree of confidence in talking about where you are in your net zero journey. But others might be at that starting point and really keen to hear about those first steps. So from your perspective, and I'll just go in the same order each time, but Marc, from your perspective, what do you see as the 3 key enabling conditions in order to give that strategy the best chance of success?
Yeah, thank you. Look, I think the first one is that, I think if it's driven by a belief that sustainable business is driving superior performance, so it is the way to do good business. That is, I think, the first must that you have. If you feel that this is a must-do thing rather than a want-to-do thing, and you're having difficulty seeing the returns, then I think it will not work. And that goes together with a very long-term multi-stakeholder mindset. I mean, it's 2020 and we're talking about 2050. So this is a 30-year, let's say, roadmap that you need to embark on. And, when you're in the fast-moving consumer goods, when we do product innovations, it's 18 months when you move on to the next thing. So you have to really have a long-term multi-stakeholder mindset. The second one, I think, is the alignment across the organization. So when the top is convinced that we want to do it, we have a lot of very passionate people in Unilever around sustainability because they've joined us, because we've been at this journey for 10 years. But the alignment on how to do it happen, because there's so many different components in product design, in capital investment, is how you market the product, how you use the product, how you make it attractive for consumers. So the alignment of organization, including the alignment of targets and setting accountabilities, is the second one. And the third one that I would call out is partnerships. This will never work if you do it alone. And it starts with a coalition of the willing. As an example, in Unilever, we are part of the We Mean Business Coalition. And we've just joined, together with 9 other companies, the Transform to Net Zero Coalition. You need a coalition of the willing to get started. And I always, given as an example, I would give the carbon labeling And if you go back 30 years when people started to put food labeling on products, and you look at that journey that took 30 years, today you have a standard food nutrition label on every product. So you know how to read it. It's the same everywhere you go, but it's taken 30 or 40 years to get there. Now we don't have that time for carbon. So how are you going to do it? You will only be able to do this if you work together and not compete. So starting with a coalition of the willing, then as Xavier is calling out, getting your suppliers on the journey, getting the like-minded partners on the same journey to also get them to set science-based targets, to get them to switch to renewable electricity and looking at their footprint and see the opportunity. Getting the partnerships thing right is absolutely critical, because just doing it by yourself, you will never get there, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Marc. Xavier, what have you experienced as the sort of 3 key enabling conditions in your journey?
Yeah, thank you, Anna. I will build on what Marc said and not repeat again. If you allow me, I have 4, and I'll do it. I'll take a bonus. I'll take a credit from here. I give it back for the next question. So, finance sector has a huge role to play. We see with quite a lot of hope the changing of gear. We see the finance sector elevating its game. Being more demanding on companies, on their climate strategies. Everybody saw in the press latest decisions, observations from some of the biggest funds, BlackRock being one of them, about what companies should be showing in terms of climate proactivity, climate strategies, and all these sort of things. We see European Union's approach towards taxonomy on a very positive light. So we hope and we believe finance is going to be a good and strong lever, provided finance can lend, support models which are virtuous with more, in a more favorable light, better conditions than the not so great and not so low carbon model. So finance has a big role to play, certainly. It could be a barrier, it could be a hurdle, should it not play its role the way we could expect it to play. Second is, carbon is still complex to understand. Few people talk carbon fluently. Myself, though my role is to be mastering this art, I keep on learning things on carbon every other day. So simplification, digitization of information, making it understandable by B2C, B2B, a load of work is to be done yet. People talk carbon, they may mistake millions with thousands. What is about my product I buy in the store, 52 grams, is it good, is it bad, is it better than it could be worse? Would I do it at home? Would it be lighter? Is it, it's very, very complex. So digitization is certainly something on which we have to progress a lot together. The third one is, I believe we need to master the art of change management. I pleaded lately in one of my blogs about, we have IPCC for what we know, climate science. We should have an IPPC, an internal governmental panel for people change. We should master the art of change management. For you, for me, it may work differently. If, for instance, I moved vegetarian 15 years ago, what triggered that move from me? Maybe one thing. Some other people say, okay, I stopped flying. For some other people, let me repair my stuff. Let me work with this brand. Let me work with that company. So what make all of us change? For me, there's a huge barrier, which is our ability to change. And maybe a huge opportunity is to improve our collective will to change and to master the art of change. There are so many ways, and we see each of us in our lives, that the triggers for us, and even in corporations, for corporations to change, are so varied. Emulation, envy, performance, right thing to do, cost saving, new markets, feel good factor, you name it. So I think for me, this is maybe a third hurdle and opportunity to overcome. And the last is, though we are corporations on this call, I realize as an individual that I think individuals are a huge power as consumers, voters, parents, whatever, you name it, shareholders. And if we stop putting it only on the monkey on the shoulders of corporations and government, and look at broader the ability of everybody to really make an impact and change and tell it and explain it, that is not only, I just can influence 25% of my footprint, 75%, I've read that. It's government, corporations, and finance. Me as a citizen, I just can't do my bit. And this is completely, for me, wrong. It has to be changed because there's a lot of levers in the hands of us as in our so many roles, as employees, as managers, but also as citizens in many ways. So that's for me a hurdle and a barrier, because that thought is not enough present, and some people believe they can't do anything. And back to the way we use products, we repair, we use them in a manner which is efficient, we select the right brands, we select the right partners, we can really make a huge impact. That's my fourth. Back to you, Anna.
Lovely, thank you. Well, you took us into the territory of the next question anyway,
Also,
in terms of barriers. So absolutely, and I think a lot of the flip side of the enabling conditions is, of course, a barrier. But if for each of you, if you could just pull out the two, if you can, the two most pertinent, two most material barriers that you think that you've either experienced already in the strategy or that you can see as risks up on your horizon. Marc.
Yeah, I mean, if I just take it very close to home for a minute, in the elimination of carbon in our own operations that we've been at for 10 years, you have two types of energy. You have electricity and you have gas for heat. We have a lot of heating and cooling processes in Unilever. The electricity has been done, and you know, it's amazing how the electricity 20 years ago would be associated with all of those bad things in terms of coal and pollution, etc. And today, actually, electricity is a big part of the savior. You know, think about electric vehicle, think about how you get green electricity and how the industry has made that move. So the electricity for us has been done. We are now in a big program how to eliminate natural gas from our heating processes, with biomass, with biogas, also move to electricity, etc., etc. And it's much more complex. It's much more complex because also the circularity of biomass, you know, you really need to be very conscious about when you're going into biomass that it's not just anything, because if it doesn't have additionality and if it's not circular, then you're not really helping things along. So that has been proving more challenging. I think green logistics is a particular challenge, not the last mile logistics, because I think electric is clearly the way to go. But in Unilever, you know, on average, every product travels between 1,000 and 3,000 kilometers, and that is usually on the truck. And so that has been a big challenge for us. And then the last one is, you know, in 2010 we said we wanted to halve the impact in your home. And whilst we've done a lot of good stuff, you know, we taught you how to wash your clothes on cold temperatures and saving a lot of carbon, etc., etc. But we saw every year the carbon footprint in our consumers' homes get up rather than go down until 2016. It now starts to drop. But let's say one of the big barriers is let's say the limited influence and the on timing and roadmap to get a green environment in consumers' home. For us as a fast-moving consumer business has been a big barrier. I think we're over that now. But remember, we have 65% of our business in developing and emerging markets, and there it's still a very real challenge.
That's great. Thank you very much, Marc. Xavier, building on what you said there around kind of that individual choices is both a barrier and enabler. Is there anything else that you're seeing as critical barriers that are potentially going to be a risk to your strategy?
True. The availability of low carbon everything is going to be a limiting factor in the next years. Low carbon electricity is coming now in most countries. Still, we are struggling in some countries. Low carbon resources are yet to emerge as mainstream. You know, recycled polyamide, recycled polycarbonate, low carbon logistics offers exist in small pieces and pockets in the world. So that's certainly something which is needed in huge quantities. Should we want to reduce our scope 3 upstream more drastically? We also need for circular business models to emerge. Some of them are struggling to make business sense. You know, it's costly at times to take back a resource, to bring it back into an acceptable form with all the standards and the norms and the costs, and petrol and oil being so, I would say, quote, quote, affordable these days, that virgin resources as a whole tend to be very economically attractive compared to secondary. So there's a huge, I think, limiting factor in the ability for companies to source low carbon, recycled materials. And even if few companies are able to, say, contractualize, take long-term commitments, which are complexity in its own, power purchase agreement or long-term contract for commodities, it's still a very small portion of the needs. So that it may be the one thing I would highlight is that availability. And for this, we need certainly upstream suppliers helping that resources to come up effectively, but maybe some nudges, some deals and stimuli from governments to help those models to emerge, without which it may take too long. That's what we see.
Thank you. We're getting some great questions over on the audience participation part of this. So I have just one more that I'm going to ask, which is really around leadership and leadership cultures. And I think this goes to your IPPC that you proposed there, Xavier. So making a net zero commitment takes quite a degree of bravery, actually, at the leadership level, because it's a long horizon and not everything is certain on the pathway. And so it takes that ability to make a bold commitment and to sit comfortably with the uncertainty of that. And that's quite a shift in leadership cultures, let's be honest, where people want to be seen as having the answers. So in each of your organizations, what have you been doing, maybe just pull out one thing, to help foster that kind of leadership culture of bravery and the ability to cope with uncertainty? Marc, I'll go to you first. Oh, you're on mute.
Thanks, Hannah. Well, there are four things. I'll keep it really short. One is accountability. Individual accountability is really important. The second one is real passion and commitment. If you're not committed about this stuff, Unilever is not the right place for you to work. So we really want leaders with real passion and commitment. We're allowing a lot of experimentation at this stage of the journey. You need to not shut things down. You need to allow experimentation and thereby allow failure, because 9 out of the 10 experiments fail, and that is okay. And the last bit is give a lot of freedom to operate. Because that's where, let's say, the innovative solutions are being found. So those are, I would say, 4 traits of our leadership culture that we're really trying to drive in this space.
Fantastic, thank you. Xavier?
So on our side, I think it very much comes from our CEO, Jean-Pascal Tricoire, was exactly as you said, took a bold commitment back in Climate Week, New York, saying we want to be net zero. And frankly, we didn't have the answers to all of the steps in the journey. And why is he taking that lead on behalf of our 27 billion euro companies? Because he knows this is the right thing to do. And you know, we'll find the solutions on the way. So there's a bit of a personal and a cultural dimension to that. Also because he and some of his executive committee members are part of multi-stakeholder groups around climate. He's himself in the board of UNGC globally. So certainly that's a fantastic enabler for us and a catalyst to have such a CEO. If I go beyond the CEO himself, it seems the culture has created the company has created a culture of outside in. We look at, are we part of the solution or are we part of the problem? How we make a one planet prosperity? Can we what can we do to make it 1.5 degrees compatible? The question is, should we not? Is like, how do we get there? So somehow the company has been, over the last 10 years, I would say, obsessed with finding solutions to those bigger problems. And then the last thing, certainly there's a bit of governance as well, where there is a barometer, there is a scorecard at the level of the company where 60,000 of us gets incentivized, gets rewarded every year based on our climate circular performance. And it's really meant by the leader, it's serious. So as much as cash and turnover and bottom line counts, our performance in those very quantified dimensions of CO2 performance really are shown important because, by the way, everybody's paid based on this, starting with the CEO down to 60,000 of us. So from the intention at the top and the dare to be bold culture down to the nuts and bolts of how it makes the reward system work, I think there is some alignment here, which I felt in this company.
That's great. Thank you, Xavier. So we have quite a few questions coming through. So one that's for each of you, which is around what is the future for nature-based solutions in your net zero strategy? Marc, I know this is something that's talked about quite a bit in yours when I was having a read through.
Yeah, no, look, at the end of the day, climate and nature and social are all different sides of the same coin, because it is, you cannot fix one without the other. So it's very clear that nature-based solutions are going to be part of it. In terms of reforestation, restoration, resilience of natural habitat, particularly in our business where we have 8 million tons of agricultural raw materials that goes into our products every year, that have a footprint and a water print and a nature print, etc., etc. So they're very much linked. But my only plea would be it cannot only be one or the other. It has to be a combination, because if you only do a nature-based solution and you don't cut your emissions, that is also not a good balance. So it definitely needs to be both. And if you read our climate and nature announcement, you will indeed see that it's a very integrated approach. But it has to be holistic, and it has to be, I think it has to be very linked to your business. And so for us, it's a very natural link because of our land footprint and our agricultural footprint and our forest footprint that we have.
Great, thank you. Xavier, how about for
Thanks,
you?
Anna. The good thing with you asking me to step in as a second, I have time to prepare my answers, so this is much more comfortable. No, I think as many companies, we know we are nature dependent. We are nature based on everything. We need copper, aluminum, steel, paper, wood, plastic. All of this is from nature. So I guess the question asked is not exactly that one, but we know how much we dependent on this. We just came out with a full worldwide global biodiversity footprint with the global biodiversity score, which we hear is a way to go, and we see a lot of promise in knowing exactly how much we are directly and indirectly dependent upon nature, may have a bilateral impact onto nature, and that's a starting point for us to have a much more narrow, precise, worldwide biodiversity strategy for both conserving biodiversity wherever we operate. We have 1,100 sites globally, and we source from various parts of the globe, and of course be more cognizant about the entire nature dependency will allow us to be much smarter in our sourcing decisions and in terms of engaging our employees wherever they operate, in terms of partnering and regenerating biodiversity when it's feasible. So maybe the question was a bit different. Nature based solutions. We do push ourselves to use bio, meaning certified or recycled resources for cardboard and pallets. For plastics, we have some prototypes on bioplastics. It's a bit yet technically difficult for us to get those plastic at the same electrical and electromagnetic performance as other plastics, but this is R&D on which we are. So it's not yet mainstream. But besides the bio, meaning from cereals or corn or wheat or potato plastic, which may exist, in our sector, it will be more recycled, secondary, for which we have more hopes to have more of that closed loop and not extracting any fossil resources after some time. That's the answer from Schneider we can make today.
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask, we probably only have time for one more question, but let's see how we go. So one of the ones that's come up is around carbon pricing, and what are each of your views on some of the factors that need to be incorporated into having an effective carbon pricing market in order for net zero to be achievable? Marc, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we believe that carbon pricing is an incredibly important tool that every government should embrace, because I think many companies have started to do it. There are more than 40 governments that have some kind of scheme, but the problem is that because it's not harmonized, there's no Article 6 of the Paris Agreement yet. It's ineffective at the moment, and we would go as far to say that we believe that by 2030, the world needs to price its carbon externality correctly, which we think is, let's say $70 to $100 or something like that. And why is that important? Because A, it would put a level playing field in, and B, it would drive enormous creativity and innovation in companies to then to get real about this challenge. We would be, let's say, mostly in favor of a pricing mechanism that is a market mechanism, but that means you need Article 6, because today, if you claim that you can fly carbon neutral by buying $3 a ton, let's say, offsets from a project in 2004, you have to really ask yourself whether you're helping the consumer become carbon neutral or whether you're misinforming that consumer or misleading that consumer. And so we believe that carbon pricing would be best, but if it is in the form of tax, then we need to be very clear that the taxation that then will be levied is also used to reduce carbon and not just used in a general shortage because every government has problems because of the COVID crisis. So, but we do believe that carbon pricing has a very, very important role to play. We've done it internally at a very, very small scale, but pricing of the externalities, and carbon is only one of them. Water is another one, and waste is another one. Is where the world needs to go, and I think it's primarily the role of governments to create that level playing field. We would welcome it at Unilever.
Great, thank you, Xavier.
Yeah, likewise, we would welcome any price to externality which will reflect the needs. Today, indeed, there are very fragmented carbon markets around the globe. If you look at the graph, it's just a portion, less than 10% of the global emissions of carbon are under any form of carbon scheme, carbon market. So it's still very limited, and the price in those markets is still not so high. So virtually the trigger to decarbonize through the cost of carbon is limited at best in most parts of the globe, and for sure any price signal would help accelerate the change which we touched upon earlier. It's true for other commodities or resources. We talk about emission, we talk about the cost of energy, the cost of electricity, the cost of water, the cost of timber, the cost of and when you have the end-to-end understanding of those ecosystems, there is some realization that certainly it would be ideal to have a switch from the cost of labor to the cost of resources, and there'll be a lot of political discussions in countries or globally to say, should we tax less jobs to make more of these circular jobs a reality, and tax more the resources from nature, which today are too cheap. Certainly there's something around that. The last point is internally at Schneider, like Marc is doing at Unilever, we are placing, say, a price to carbon in key decision making when we do design the supply chain strategy. So we have 200 factories globally, 100 distribution centers. So certainly, as we do just currently now for the next 3 years with the head of supply chain from Schneider, we do factor in different scenarios and see with a price of 30 euro per ton or 130 euro per ton, how would it play? And depending on the price of carbon, how would that strategy would be influenced? We do the same for any new product development. It's mandatory to use a carbon price to eco-design and other such decisions like M&A or big capex. So we apply it to ourselves, but as a fake, if you want, as a dummy currency to bring some light on our decisions. Back to you, Anna.
Thank you. So we have literally just a couple of minutes more before we close. So I'm just going to ask for a real quick answer in terms of, you've talked quite a bit around the role of government in businesses being able to deliver their net zero strategies. This is obviously a time of immense decision-making pressure for governments as we go through a crisis, and really the decisions made now will really shape not just only the next decade, but the century ahead of us. So from your perspective, what's the key thing that governments need to be considering in terms of net zero whilst they're in this intense crisis-oriented decision-making phase? Marc?
Sure. Keep focus on setting their own net zero targets and emission reduction, and always keep a view of that we're trying to help 8 billion citizens to lead carbon neutral lives.
Focus. Thank you. Xavier?
Yeah, 2 things, maybe public procurement is one, and second, channel those billions or trillions to give a nudge, to give some initial energy for new business models to emerge, rather than necessarily twisting arms of some dimensions which may not be perfect in some areas. So give some incentive to those circular business models, local models, energy efficient, resource efficient. For us, there's a huge opportunity, and government can play a huge role here.
Great. Thank you so much. So thank you both for all of your thoughts and comments and insights into your own net zero strategies. Thank you to the audience for the questions. There were some great questions there. We didn't get to cover all of them, but hopefully through the rest of the conference, people will have the opportunity to hear some answers to those questions. So I'll invite Liam to come back in and close off the session for you. But thank you very much to both of you. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Bye-bye.
Thank you both. So Liam,
Thanks,
I think. Maybe we've been granted more time.
Hello, yes. We was going to actually let you have a few more minutes because the discussion was being so fruitful and was getting a good number of questions in, but I know we've got some calendars to stick to. So Xavier, Marc, Hannah, thank you for a great discussion and for getting today's proceedings underway. I do appreciate you sparing the time and sharing the great work that all three organisations are doing. So keep up the great work. Thank you.
Great.